mouth full of gum in a driveway. My friends on fire in the back of my car, lay their bodies. Where's my mind? Where's my mind? They'll be here pretty soon, looking through my room for the money, biting my nails. I'm too young to go to jail. It's kind of funny. Where's my mind? Where's my mind? Where's my mind? Where's my mind? Maybe it's in the gutter where I left my lover. What an expensive fate. My V is for vendetta. Thought that I'd feel better, but now I got a bellyache.
Hello APA and welcome to our whole school assembly on the power of creativity. This assembly supports and encourages two of our values in particular. Value 1, an appreciation and curiosity for life and learning, and value 2, the courage and ambition to unlock their full potential. Today we'll be looking at what it means to be creative, when and how creativity can take place, and finally, why is it important to foster our own creativity and what that would mean for our future. This week's quote is from Buddhism, which reads, "You cannot travel the path until you have become the path itself." For me, I believe Buddha is highlighting the importance of dedicating time to build the foundations of your own life, instead of just following the path and life of others, which really links well with what our assembly is going to be about today. So, first of all, what does the word creativity mean? Well, it is simply defined as inventiveness, the use of imagination or original ideas to create something. Before we delve in a little deeper, if someone were to ask you if you were creative, what would you say? Alan Turing, J.K. Rowling, Steve McQueen, and Isambard.
When you hear the word creative, you might think of a painter, or a playwright, or an author, or a photographer, or a filmmaker, or a chef. In other words, you might think of people who make things. I think it's what we mean when we use a label like creative type. But there's no such thing as creative type. We are all creative, every one of us. We just need a bigger definition of creativity. Yes, creativity involves making things, but it can also mean mashing up ideas in innovative ways. It can mean thinking differently about data and finding unique solutions to practical problems. It can mean hacking systems and tweaking things in unusual ways. It can mean exploring ideas and navigating information until you become an expert curator. It can mean designing systems that empower the creative work of others. It can mean creating change in the world by speaking truth and leading movements and interacting with people. See, each of these creative approaches shape our world in profound ways. And the more we see the creativity all around us, the more we are able to appreciate the creativity inside ourselves.
Alan Turing, a British mathematician, acknowledged as being one of the most innovative and powerful thinkers of the 20th century, and known as being the godfather of modern computing. J.K. Rowling, a British author and screenwriter, she has won multiple awards and sold more than 500 million copies of Harry Potter, which became the best-selling book series in history. Steve McQueen, a British filmmaker and video artist. For his works of art, McQueen has received the Turner Prize, which is the highest award given to a British visual artist. And finally, Isambard Brunel, a British civil engineer who is considered one of the most ingenious and prolific figures in engineering history. His designs revolutionised public transport and modern engineering. Each and every one of these people were and are creative thinkers. And yet all unique in their execution of creativity. So what is creativity if it can present itself in such a diverse way? Well, creativity is the ability to solve problems with relevance and novelty. So let's break this down. Relevancy. Relevancy means actually solving the problem, as in it was relevant to the problem at hand and provided an actual solution to it. A solution without relevancy is no solution at all. Novelty. Novelty is harder to judge, but it's when you're able to solve a problem in an original way, a way that isn't what's expected or has been done before. Putting it together, creativity is really just solving problems in original ways. So where can and does creativity grow in an individual?
Think outside the box. It's a popular idea. It's the story of the lone artist going away and making something radically different. But what if that's not always the case? What if creativity isn't always about thinking outside the box? What if it involves thinking differently about the box? Ever watched a child play with a refrigerator box? It becomes a car, an airplane, a robot suit, a table, a tunnel. Think about Minecraft or Legos. They're basically variations on stacking boxes, and yet the simplicity and lack of options actually unleash the power of creativity. This is the idea of creative constraint. It's the notion that innovation happens when you run into barriers that force you to find a new route. Creativity often involves problem solving and systems hacking. Yes, creativity can mean an empty canvas or a blank page, but it can also be a roll of duct tape. Think of Camden Yards or AT&T Ballpark or Fenway Park or Wrigley Field. These places are creative because they were built around quirky spaces. Similarly, chefs have developed the most creative recipes when forced to use specific ingredients. Think about the Apollo 13 engineers who helped the astronauts back to Earth with limited time and resources. Creative constraint is also what makes Vine videos or 3-chord punk or live theater so fun to experience. It's also why the plot constraints of the hero's journey led to the epic Star Wars trilogy. The point is, life will hand you boxes, but every box is an opportunity to be more creative. It just depends on how you think about it.
Many of us were able to experience the power of creative constraints during the lockdown. As you know, in March 2020, it was the start of a global pandemic which saw people being restricted and constrained in ways that they had never experienced before. During this time, people were finding themselves being more creative, whether that was taking up or revisiting creative hobbies such as arts and crafts, music and literature, or finding new and inventive ways to socialise with friends and family who they could no longer see anymore. People were using creativity to connect and send messages of hope to others around the world. And you experienced having to learn creatively, and we experienced having to find new ways to educate creatively as well. But more importantly, we witnessed scientists gathering together to find new and inventive ways to quickly try and find a vaccine. This just shows the power of creative constraints and how important creativity is in a time of need and in a time of crisis as well. So why is it so important to harness our own creativity, particularly for the future? Well, as artificial intelligence becomes a bigger part of this world, process-driven jobs are becoming even more obsolete. No longer will companies pay people to do the same task over and over again. Robots can likely take on those tasks. Instead, companies are more interested in finding people who can think of new and better solutions. So if you would like to future-proof your career, there's no better approach than focusing on thinking more creatively. Instead of settling for solutions that have worked previously, try and push yourself to think of newer and better ideas. Begin with practicing this at school or during independent learning tasks. How could you approach your learning differently? Perhaps if you're used to working more independently, try and push yourself to collaborate more with your peers. You might learn something new or see another approach. If you tend to feel safer working with others, just in case you do something differently, try and pluck up the courage to embrace your differences. Remember, creativity is a skill. The more we encourage and practice it, the better we will get at it. I would like to end the assembly with a few tips on how to foster and embrace your own creativity. I know these are things that I will also be trying to encourage in my own life as well. So let's have a look at what they are. First of all, try and change your daily routine. This could simply mean just changing the route that you take to school, or perhaps the route that you take to football practice. By just changing an element of your routine, it can allow you to soak in new experiences. I don't know about you, but I know that when I stick to routines, I end up being what's called on autopilot, and I don't end up actually embracing the environment around me. So this is a really good place to start. Secondly, you could try and soak up new influences. So this just means don't just stick with what you know or what you like. Try and encourage soaking in new influences. So it could be listening to different music that you wouldn't normally listen to, or maybe picking up a book if you wouldn't normally read, or maybe watching a film genre that you wouldn't normally go for. You would be surprised by actually encouraging new things into your life can expand your own creativity. We've got this idea of being resourceful. So what does this mean? Well, being resourceful would mean simply if it was somebody's birthday, instead of buying them a card, you could try and make them a card. By doing little things like this, you're actually encouraging your creativity to be more regularly accessible. Another one is give yourself deadlines. So just like the video that we watched on creative constraints, we know that actually creativity can flourish more so when we give ourselves deadlines or constraints. So instead of saying to yourself, oh, this week I need to try and do this, why don't you give yourself an hour after school and say, during this time, I am going to try and do this. You'd be surprised what you could actually get done with the little time. Here we've got this idea of forgetting what you have done in the past. Just like we have looked at before, trying to find new ways of approaching ideas or trying to come up with solutions. It's really important that you do try and forget what you've done in the past and what has worked, and instead try and find a new way of solving this. Again, just like I've mentioned, starting this off with your schoolwork would be a great place to begin. And finally, and this is a very difficult one, I know, but it's allow yourself to be bored. We are so used to nowadays reaching for something the minute that we feel bored, whether that's constantly looking at our phone, or if we have nothing to do, we will turn on the television, or we will ring somebody to talk to them. But actually allow yourself to be bored and see what happens. If you remember when you were a child, very rarely did we actually feel bored, because we would easily be able to use our imagination or be able to find things that we could be creative with. I'd like you all to try and find one of these things that you would like to commit to this week. And to end the assembly, I would like to speak to the person next to you and talk about which one that you would like to focus on. I hope you have a brilliant week, and I would love to hear if any of you have used any of these ideas on how you can boost your own creativity. Brunel all have something in common, which was arguably the most important driving force to their success. I'd like you to have a think to yourself of what this might be.